Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
The ashes of my father, Thomas, were cold and heavy in the ceramic urn I held. The November drizzle soaked into my black coat, but I felt no chill. All I felt was a strange, hollow emptiness, a sense of relief I was ashamed to admit. I had hated my father. It was a simple, ugly truth, one that had shaped me for the past 15 years. Ever since the day I had walked into the living room as a 10-year-old boy and found him, my strong, stoic father, sitting quietly, reading a book in a floral dress and a chestnut-brown wig. My world had collapsed in that moment. My admiration for him had curdled into disgust. The safety I felt in his presence had dissolved into a burning, acid shame. He wasn't a man. He was something else, something weak and strange and mortifying. I had spent my entire adolescence pushing him away. I built a fortress of silence and contempt. I refused to meet his eyes. I left home the moment I was old enough and never truly came back, making only brief, suffocating appearances for holidays. And now he was gone. A sudden, massive heart attack. He was gone, and all that was left was unresolved resentment and this heavy, ceramic urn. After the funeral, I returned to my childhood home for the last time, to sort through his things. The house smelled of old books and dust, a scent I had once loved, but now found suffocating. I went to the attic, the place where he kept his personal effects. I was expecting to find the dresses, the wigs, the evidence of his shameful secret. But instead, I found only old boxes filled with books and papers. In an old, battered oak chest, under stacks of old photo albums, I found it. A worn leather-bound journal, the cover soft and supple with age. On the first page, in my father's familiar, slanted handwriting, was a single inscription. To my love, Eleanor. Eleanor. It was my mother's name. The woman I had never known, who had died giving birth to me. It was his diary. And it was written to her. My heart hammered, a guilty curiosity rising in me. I sat down on the dusty attic floor, opened the journal, and began to read. June 5th, 2008. My love, Eleanor. Our son, James, asked about you today for the first time. He's 4 and his eyes. God, they're your eyes. He pointed to our wedding portrait over the mantel and asked, Daddy, who is the beautiful lady? I tried. I told him about you. I said you were an angel, that you came and gave me the most precious gift in him, and then you had to fly back to the stars. He just looked at me, his brown eyes so clear and serious, and asked a question that shattered my heart. When is she coming back? I didn't know what to say, Eleanor. I just held him, breathing in the sweet, dusty smell of his hair. I feel so inadequate, a clumsy, hulking man trying to fill a space that is shaped exactly like you. I don't have your softness, your laugh, the warmth you radiated as easily as the sun. I just have my love, and I'm afraid it's not enough. Our son needs his mother. And all he has is me. What am I going to do, my love? How am I supposed to be a father and a mother to our little boy? I sat there on the cold attic floor, my father's words blurring before my eyes. James. That was me. I barely remembered the moment, a hazy, dreamlike memory. But the pain in his words was clear and sharp. I remembered asking about her. I remembered being obsessed with that wedding portrait, with the beautiful woman with the radiant smile. She was a mystery, a fairy tale my father would tell me before bed. He told me about her long, honey-colored hair, her love for sunflowers, the way her laugh sounded like chimes. He painted a perfect picture of her, a mythical mother I longed to meet. I never considered how hard it must have been for him to constantly have to conjure the memory of the woman he had lost. For me, she was a dream. For him, she had been a raw, open wound. I turned another page, my hand trembling slightly. September 12th, 2009. Dearest Eleanor. Today was a hard one. James is 5 now, and his heart aches for you with a fierce, physical longing. We watched an animated movie tonight, one where the mother sings a lullaby to her child. After it was over, he turned to me, his eyes brimming with tears. "I want Mommy to sing to me," he said, his voice trembling. "I want Mommy to hold me. I want to meet her, Daddy. Just once. I promise I'll be good." I tried to explain again about heaven, about the stars. But adult logic is no match for a child's grief. He doesn't want a story. He wants his mother. He cried himself to sleep in my arms, his small face wet against my shirt. I sat in the dark for hours afterward, holding our son, listening to his steady breathing. And I felt a terrible, crushing helplessness, Eleanor. I can build him a treehouse. I can teach him to throw a ball. I can fix his broken bicycle. But I cannot give him the one thing he craves. I cannot give him your softness, the comfort only a mother can provide. I look at your picture and I search for an answer. I would do anything, anything in this world, to soothe his pain, just for a moment. But I am a man and he needs a mother. The distance between those two things feels like an impossible, uncrossable chasm. I closed my eyes, the memory flooding back. I remembered that night. I remembered that burning, aching longing for a person I had never known. I remembered the warmth of my father's arms, but it hadn't been enough. It wasn't soft. It didn't smell like her. Those years after I started school were the hardest. I saw my classmates with their mothers, the hugs at the school gate, the kisses on scraped knees. Every one of those scenes was a fresh, sharp twist of the knife of my own loss. My father tried. God, how he tried. He threw the best birthday parties. He volunteered for every school field trip. He became the cool dad, adored by all my friends. But I didn't want a cool dad. I wanted my mom. My obsession grew. I wanted to know more about her. How long was her hair? What colors did she like to wear? What did her voice sound like when she sang? And my father, in his own grief, patiently answered every question, building the myth of Eleanor, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect woman. He was giving me what I asked for. But I didn't know that every question I asked was a fresh cut on his own wound. I was too lost in my own pain to see his. October 20th, 2009. Eleanor. I did something mad today. Something desperate and probably wrong, but I don't know what else to do. James has been fixated on your hair. Was it soft, he asks. Was it long like a princess's? I tell him, but the words are empty. So, I went to the attic. I opened the old trunk where I keep your things, the ones I can't bear to look at but can't bear to throw away. And I found it. The wig you bought for that Halloween party years ago, the one you never wore. It's auburn, close to your color, and it's long and soft. I don't know what possessed me. The silence of the house, the weight of our son's grief. I just put it on. I stood in front of the dusty attic mirror. The reflection was grotesque. A tired, bearded man in a woman's wig. I felt foolish. I felt ashamed. But then I looked at the hair. I touched the soft tresses, and for a moment, I could almost feel you there. I could almost imagine the way you used to sweep it out of your eyes. And then the idea came. A terrible idea, one that could scar our son for life. But it was also the only idea I had. What if James can't have his mother, but he could see a piece of her? A shadow? A whisper of your presence? I know it's insane. I am a man, a father. But I am also a desperate widower who would do anything to bring his son a moment of peace. I don't know if I have the courage to do it. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of a strange, twisted kind of hope. I've put the wig away, but I haven't locked the chest. I read the passage over and over, a cold dread creeping up my spine. This was it. The beginning. The moment his desperation had overridden his reason. I had known none of this, of course. I only knew that after a particularly hard spell, my father seemed to find a new way of talking to me about my mother. He didn't just tell stories anymore. He started to demonstrate. Your mother would sit like this when she was reading, he'd say, straightening his back just so, mimicking a gesture he said was hers. And she would brush her hair back like this. He would perform a graceful, sweeping motion in the air. At the time, I thought it was sweet. I thought it was his way of making the stories more vivid. I didn't realize it was a rehearsal. He was testing out the movements, the mannerisms. He was building a character. He was preparing for the role of his life. And I, his grieving son, was both his audience and his entire motivation, November 15th, 2009. My love, Eleanor. I did it. I don't know if I've done the right thing, or if I've just caused an irreparable wound. But I did it. Tonight, James was crying again, that deep, aching hurt for you. He wanted to see Mommy's hair. Just the hair, he said. So, I found my courage. I told him to close his eyes and count to 100. I ran up to the attic, my heart hammering in my chest. I put on the wig. Then I found one of your old dresses, that simple blue sundress you loved. It's loose, comfortable. I just slipped it on over my clothes. I felt like a fool, an imposter in my own home. I came downstairs, moving as quietly as I could. The room was lit only by his small nightlight. I stood in the shadow of his doorway, with my back to him, so only the long hair was visible in the dim light. 100, he whispered. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, letting him see the silhouette of a figure in a dress, with long, soft hair cascading down the back. I heard him gasp, a small, pure sound of utter wonder. Mommy, he whispered. My heart broke, Eleanor. I didn't answer. I just gave a small shake of my head, the way you used to. And then, before my courage could fail, I walked away, out of the room and back up the stairs. I tore the costume off and came back down, trembling and sweating as myself. When I went back into his room a few minutes later, he was sitting bolt upright in bed, his eyes shining. Daddy, Daddy, I saw her, he cried. You were right. She's an angel. I saw her hair. He wasn't scared. He was filled with a radiant, magical joy. He fell asleep tonight with a smile on his face for the first time in months. So I sit here and I wonder, what have I done? I've given him a gift, a moment of magic. But I have also lied to him in the most profound way. I've created a ghost, an illusion. I've played God, and I'm terrified of the consequences. But God help me, Eleanor, to see him smile. I think I might do it again. I closed the journal, feeling sick to my stomach. That memory, unlike so many others, was crystal clear. It was a lightning flash in my mind. I remembered closing my eyes. I remembered the excited anticipation. And I remembered opening them and seeing the silhouette. In a 6-year-old's mind, it wasn't a man in a dress. It was a miracle. It was an angel. It was my mother, visiting me for a fleeting moment. It validated all the stories my father had told. It made her real. I hadn't seen the tremor in the figure's shoulders. I hadn't registered the hesitation. I saw only what I was desperate to see. And my father, seeing my joy, had been trapped. The first lie, born of desperation, had been a success. It had brought comfort, not confusion. He had stepped through a door, and now he had no idea how to go back. He had created a monster out of his love, and that monster was my hope. December 24th, 2009. My dearest Eleanor, tonight was Christmas Eve. James has been asking for weeks if Mommy would visit again. He leaves drawings for her under the tree. The hope in his eyes is a constant, beautiful, and terrifying thing. So, tonight, I became her again. It was different this time. More elaborate. I was bolder. He didn't just see my back. I found your old, long, navy blue coat and a soft, cream-colored scarf. I put them on, along with the dress and the wig. I even put on a pair of your gloves. I waited until he was in the living room, looking at the tree. I walked through the hallway, just in his peripheral vision. He turned and saw me for a moment, a figure in a coat and scarf, my face mostly hidden, before I disappeared into the kitchen. He saw me from the side. He saw a profile. I fled back upstairs, my heart in my throat. When I came back down as myself, he was ecstatic. She was wearing her winter coat, Daddy. Does that mean she gets cold in heaven? The logistics of this lie are becoming complex. I'm having to build a whole mythology. But the effect it has on him is undeniable. He is a happier child. He feels connected to you, to the idea of you. The ghost I have created is a benevolent one. She is a guardian angel who leaves him feeling watched over, not haunted. But the toll it takes on me, Eleanor, it is immense. When I take off the clothes, the wig, I am left with such a profound sense of emptiness. I spend those few minutes as a shadow of you, and then I have to go back to being just me. The contrast is a brutal reminder of what I've lost. I am becoming two people. the father my son needs me to be, and a pale, trembling imitation of the mother he desperately wants. How long can I keep this up? Every time I do it, I weave the lie a little deeper. Every time, I risk him seeing too much, a flash of my jawline in the wrong light, the sound of my footsteps being too heavy. It's a high-wire act, and I'm performing it without a net. Reading the entry, I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I remembered that Christmas Eve. I remembered the flash of the navy blue coat. I had been so convinced, so utterly certain, that it was her. I had told all my friends at school that my mother, the angel, had visited me on Christmas Eve. I became the boy with the magical, secret mother. It made me special. It made my loss feel less like a tragedy and more like a fairy tale. My father, in his desperate attempt to soothe my pain, had inadvertently given me a story that set me apart. He thought he was just giving me a fleeting image, a moment of comfort. He didn't realize he was building a narrative for my entire childhood. A narrative that was becoming more and more elaborate and more fragile. And the cost to him. I had never considered it. I only saw the result of his performance, my own happiness. I never saw the actor, backstage, after the curtain fell. I never saw the man, alone in the attic, surrounded by the ghost of his wife, feeling his own profound emptiness. He was giving me my mother, but in the process, he was losing himself. April 2nd, 2010. Eleanor. I made a terrible mistake today. Or maybe it was a breakthrough. I don't know anymore. James has been sick, a low fever and a cough. He's been miserable and listless on the sofa all day. And he keeps asking, what would Mommy do if she were here? He wants to hear your voice. What song would she sing, he asks. What story would she read? I tell him, but he just shakes his head. No, your voice is wrong. That one. It still cuts me like a knife. Tonight, after he was asleep, I went to the attic. I didn't get dressed up. I just sat in the dark. And I tried. I tried to find your voice. I tried to speak like you. To make my voice lighter, higher. The sound that came out was grotesque, a freakish parody. But then I remembered how you used to read to him. You never just read. You performed. You would do voices for the characters. And you had one, a soft, almost voiceless whisper you used for the gentle characters, the fairy godmothers and the small animals. I tried that voice. A soft, breathy, almost unpitched whisper. It wasn't high. It wasn't a screechy falsetto. It was just soft. It wasn't my voice. It was the voice of a stranger. I didn't realize that James had woken up and come out into the hall. He was standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, listening. Who's there? He called up, his voice full of fear. I panicked, Eleanor. I should have stayed silent. But I didn't. I answered. In that voice. It's just a dream, my love, I whispered. Go back to bed. He stood there for a long moment. I could hear him breathing. Then he turned and went back to his room. I sat in the dark for hours, trembling, horrified at my own recklessness. I had given the ghost a voice. I had to put the journal down, my hand shaking. I remembered. God, I remembered so clearly. The whisper from the attic. I had thought I was dreaming. I had thought it was the voice of my mother, an angel whispering to me from heaven. It hadn't scared me. It had made me feel safe. Loved. The next day, I had asked my father about it. Dad, I think I heard Mommy talk to me last night. I remembered his face. He had looked pale, exhausted. It was just a dream, son, he had said. But there was something in his eyes I couldn't read. Now, I knew it was fear. The fear of a man who had gone too far, a man who was getting in deeper and deeper with a lie he had no idea how to escape. He had added another layer to his character. Mommy wasn't just a silent figure anymore. She now had a voice. A soft, whispering voice that he would use only on the rarest of occasions, from another room, when I was sick or sad. It became our special secret. My whispering mom. It was my balm, my ultimate comfort. I didn't realize it was a performance that was shredding my father's soul, a performance that was pushing him ever closer to the day I would discover the devastating truth. Leo spent the next few days in a state of quiet, agonizing torment. The alchemist was applying pressure, sending him encrypted messages with draft versions of the anonymous tip she planned to leak to Mikhail's associates. The threat was no longer abstract, it was a loaded gun. He looked for a way out, a third option. But there was none. His father's will was ironclad. Beatrice, he knew, would be merciless. And the alchemist held his very freedom in her hands. He was trapped in a perfect, elegant prison of someone else's design. The deadline was approaching. The sculpture was due to be delivered in 3 days. He had to act. He went to find Anya. He couldn't go through with the blackmail. He would rather face a Swiss prison than be the instrument of her terror. He had to tell her the truth. It was a desperate, probably suicidal move, but it was the only one he had left. He found her in the observatory, her favorite room, looking out at the vast, indifferent mountains. He walked in, his heart pounding a funeral drum against his ribs. "Anya," he began, and Leah's soft voice was trembling. "I have something to tell you. A confession." She turned from the window, a look of quiet, friendly curiosity on her face. He took a deep breath. "My name," he said, the words feeling like a betrayal of his own safety, "is not Leah." He reached up and, with a single, decisive movement, he pulled the pins from his hair. The carefully styled, shoulder-length bob, augmented with the semi-permanent extensions, came undone, revealing his own, shorter, unmistakably masculine haircut underneath. "My name is Leo Thorne," he said, his own deep, quiet voice returning, a sound that was a shocking, discordant note in that serene, feminine space. "My father was Marcus Thorne, your rival." He watched her face, expecting a storm. He expected fear, anger, a cry of betrayal. He expected her to press a silent alarm, to have him dragged away by her security. Instead, Anya Petrova did something utterly and completely unexpected. She laughed. It was not a hysterical laugh. It was a low, sad, and deeply, profoundly weary laugh. A laugh that held 10 years of sorrow and paranoia in it. "Of course," she whispered, shaking her head as if at a joke she had only just understood. "Of course you are." She looked at him, at the man in the beautiful woman's clothes, and her pale gray eyes were not filled with anger. They were filled with a look of immense, heartbreaking sadness. "A man," she said, her voice a dead, hollow echo. "He sent a man after all. He always sends a man." She sank into one of the chairs, her face a mask of utter, complete defeat. The ghost, the survivor, the woman who had built a fortress to protect herself from the world of men, had just discovered that she had invited a man into its very heart. The one thing she had spent a decade hiding from was standing in her observatory, wearing a silk blouse and a look of profound, desperate apology. Her greatest fear had not just found her. She had invited it in for dinner. Leo, stunned by her reaction, stood frozen. He had expected a tempest, but was met with a profound, desolate calm. It was the calm of a general who, having fought a long and bitter war, simply lays down her arms in the face of an inevitable, final defeat. "How?" she whispered, her gaze distant. "How did he find me?" So he told her. He told her everything. His father's cruel will. His ambitious half-sister. The impossible condition. The alchemist. The entire, sordid, and humiliating story. He confessed not just his identity, but his purpose, to find her secret, her weakness, and to use it to destroy her. When he got to the part about her ex-husband, Mikhail, and the alchemist's plan to use that knowledge as blackmail, a flicker of the old fear returned to her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that same, bone-deep weariness. "Of course," she said. "That is how men like Marcus Thorne fight. Not with swords, but with secrets." He finished his confession and stood there, utterly exposed, a soldier who had surrendered his weapon and was now awaiting judgment. Anya was silent for a long time, looking out at the mountains. "Marcus Thorne," she finally said, her voice a soft, contemplative murmur. "I knew him, you know. A long time ago. Before Mikhail. Before all of this." Leo stared at her, confused. "We were young," she continued, a sad, ghost of a smile on her lips. "Ambitious. We were rivals, even then. But there was a respect. A fire in him that matched my own. We were more alike than either of us ever wanted to admit." She turned her pale gray eyes to him. He never knew what happened to me. No one did. He just knew that his greatest rival had vanished without a trace. She looked at him, at the man who wore her rival's face, but his mother's bone structure. He spent the last 10 years of his life hunting a ghost, she said. Not to destroy me, I realize now, but to understand what had happened to the only person he ever considered his equal. She gave a small, bitter laugh. And in the end, he sent his son, dressed as a woman, to find me. It's almost poetic. A final, desperate move in a chess game only the two of us were playing. This was a story Leo had never known. A history hidden beneath the corporate rivalry. His father hadn't just been a brute. He had been a man obsessed, chasing the ghost of his only true adversary. What you do not know, Leo, Anya said, her voice regaining a sliver of its old, quiet authority, is that before I disappeared, Marcus Thorne and I were in the middle of our own secret negotiation. A merger. A joining of our two companies. We were going to build an empire together. The revelation was staggering. This wasn't just a rivalry. It was a failed alliance, a dream that had been shattered by Mikhail's violence. Your father's will, she said, her brilliant mind piecing it all together. It was not a humiliation. It was a test. And a message. He was sending his son, his heir, to me, not as a threat, but as an emissary. He was telling me that the only way for the Thorne legacy to survive was to join with mine. And the only way to do that was to shed the skin of his own aggressive masculinity. To send me a partner I could trust. Leo's head was spinning. The entire premise of his mission, his father's final, cruel joke, had been a misinterpretation. It wasn't an act of posthumous abuse. It was a desperate, convoluted, and incredibly strange act of hope. A final, brilliant move to finish the game they had started a decade ago. He was not a tool of humiliation. He was an ambassador. The new, staggering context of his mission left Leo reeling. He was not an instrument of his father's cruelty, but of his desperate, final ambition. He had been sent not to destroy Anya Petrova, but to forge an alliance with her. But this new understanding created an even more immediate and dangerous problem: the alchemist. Her objective was clear and brutally simple: to fulfill the literal terms of the will, to gain a significant advantage over Petrova logistics, and to collect her fee. She would not care about the nuanced, secret history between Marcus and Anya. She would only see the leverage she held, the threat of exposing Anya to her monstrous ex-husband. She is the unseen player in our game, Anya said, her voice now filled with a new, strategic clarity. The weary victim was gone, replaced by the brilliant CEO who had survived for a decade in the shadows. She is a mercenary. Her only loyalty is to her contract. She controls everything, Leo said, the reality of his own entrapment crashing down on him. She has my digital life, my finances. She threatened to frame me, to have me imprisoned. A woman who builds identities can also build prisons, Anya mused. She is a formidable opponent. She looked at Leo, at the man his father had sent, at the strange, androgynous key to a decade-old puzzle. But every fortress has a flaw. The alchemist's is her belief that she is the smartest person in the room. She sees people as assets to be managed, not as variables who can change the game. A new, dangerous alliance was being forged in the quiet of the observatory. Not between Thorne and Petrova, the corporate entities, but between Leo and Anya, two survivors. Their plan was born of a shared understanding of their opponent. The alchemist was a creature of information and control. The only way to defeat her was to control the narrative and to introduce a variable even she could not anticipate. She believes she holds your freedom as a weapon against you, Anya said. So, we must make that weapon useless. We must make you disappear, not as a fiction, but for real. The plan was audacious. They would use the alchemist's own methods against her. They would not try to escape the sanctum. They would use it as their stage. The sculpture, Leo said, a slow, dawning idea on his face. The transport is in 2 days. The alchemist expects me to use the opportunity of its delivery to present the blackmail demand. And you will, Anya said, a cold, sharp glint in her eyes. You will play the part of Leah to perfection. You will deliver the threat. You will win the game for her. She paused. And in the moment of her triumph, we will spring our trap. The trap was simple, elegant, and deeply dangerous. While Leo was performing his role as the reluctant blackmailer, Anya would be setting a new stage. She would use her own untraceable resources, her own shadowy network that had kept her hidden for 10 years, to enact a final disappearing act. She thinks she can threaten you with a Swiss prison, Anya said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. But you cannot imprison a person who no longer exists. They were no longer playing Marcus Thorne's game, or the alchemists. They were playing their own. And the prize was not an empire. It was freedom. The day the sculpture was to be created for transport was the day of the final performance. The atmosphere in the sanctum's private gallery was thick with a quiet, clinical tension. Anya's technical team was there along with Ms. Ivanova, her face an unreadable mask of stone. And observing from a discreet corner, a silent, almost invisible presence, was a woman Leo had never seen before, but knew instantly was one of the alchemist's agents. She was there to witness his compliance. Leo, as Leah, was the picture of cool, professional competence. He moved with a quiet authority, directing the creating process, his voice the calm, measured alto of a seasoned expert. He was playing his part to perfection. The moment came when he and Anya were left alone in the gallery to sign the final transfer documents. The agent was watching from the doorway. This was it. He took a deep breath. He turned to Anya, and his expression shifted into one of reluctant, pained regret. Anya, he began, and Leah's voice was a soft, sorrowful whisper. There has been a change of terms. He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was the draft of the anonymous tip the alchemist had prepared, the one detailing Anya's location, addressed to a known associate of her ex-husband. The Thorne estate has discovered your history, he said, the lie tasting like poison. They are prepared to use it. Unless you agree to a new merger. One that cedes a 60% controlling interest of Petrova Logistics to them. For the sum of $1. He watched Anya's face. She performed her role as the victim with heartbreaking perfection. A look of pure, horrified disbelief washed over her features. She looked at him, her pale gray eyes filling with a look of profound, soul-deep betrayal. You, she whispered, her voice cracking. After everything I told you, you were just a spy. I had no choice, he said, and the words were the truest part of his performance. From the doorway, he saw the alchemist's agent give a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. The blackmail was delivered. The mission was a success. You have 24 hours to sign, he said, his voice flat, turning to walk away, as if the transaction were complete. What happened next was not part of the alchemist's plan. As he walked away, Anya let out a small, choked sob. Then, with a sudden, desperate cry, she lunged, not at him, but at the massive, glass and wire sculpture they had just spent an hour preparing. With a strength born of pure, theatrical despair, she shoved the partially created artwork. It teetered for a moment, and then crashed to the polished concrete floor with a sound like 1,000 shattering chandeliers. It was a magnificent, irreplaceable piece of art, and it was now a glittering pile of ruin. If my life is to be destroyed, Anya screamed, her voice a raw, ragged thing, then I will have nothing of beauty left in it. In the ensuing chaos, as the technicians rushed forward and Ivanova began shouting into her comms, a new, far more urgent alarm began to blare. A soft, female, computerized voice filled the air. Containment breach detected in the lower-level geothermal core. Evacuate immediately. Evacuate immediately. It was a fiction, a ghost in the machine that Anya's own team had planted. The alchemist's agent, her professional composure shattered by the sheer, unpredicted violence and chaos of the scene, did what she was trained to do. She prioritized her own exit. She turned and fled towards the emergency exit. In that single, chaotic, and perfectly orchestrated moment of misdirection, Leo and Anya were momentarily forgotten. Ivanova grabbed Leo's arm. This way. Now, she commanded, pulling him not towards the main evacuation route, but towards a small, unmarked service panel in the wall. He took one last look at the beautiful, shattered sculpture on the floor. It was the price of their freedom. A masterpiece, sacrificed to save 2 human lives. The service panel opened into a dark, narrow tunnel. Geothermal maintenance shaft, Ivanova explained, her voice echoing in the confined space. It runs for 3 kilometers, right through the mountain. It emerges in the next valley. There will be a car waiting. They ran, the sound of the fake alarm fading behind them. They emerged an hour later into a different world, a quiet, snow-dusted valley bathed in the cold light of the alpine afternoon. A nondescript vehicle was waiting, its engine humming. There was no sign of Anya. "Where is she?" Leo asked, his heart pounding. "Madame Petrova is a ghost," Ivanova said, her face grim. "Ghosts do not use the same exit twice. She has her own path. She is already gone." She handed him a small, heavy envelope. "This is from her. Your payment." Leo opened it. Inside was a passport with a new name and a new identity. And a bearer bond worth a staggering amount of money. Enough to live on for the rest of his life. "And this," Ivanova said, handing him an encrypted satellite phone. "She will contact you when she is settled. She said to tell you, the game is not over. It has just entered a new phase." Ivanova gave a stiff, formal nod. "Good luck, Leo Thorne. You will need it." She then got into a separate vehicle that had appeared from the woods and was gone. Leo was alone in the middle of a Swiss valley, with a new name, a small fortune, and the clothes of a woman named Leah. He was a ghost, just like Anya. He made his way to Zurich, then Paris, a man in a woman's clothes, moving through the world unseen. He was in a cafe a week later, reading the news on a tablet, when he saw the story. The art world was reeling from the tragic accident at the Sanctum. But the bigger story was in the financial pages. Anya Petrova, the reclusive CEO, had vanished. In her place, a new, aggressive leadership, fronted by Ms. Ivanova, had taken control of Petrova Logistics. And their first act was to announce a stunning, unexpected, and incredibly hostile takeover of Thorne Industries, which, in the wake of Marcus Thorne's death, was in a state of disarray under Beatrice's clumsy leadership. Leo stared at the screen, a slow, dawning understanding spreading through him. This was Anya's plan. She hadn't just run. She had attacked. She had used the chaos of her own disappearance to launch the corporate assault of a lifetime. And then he saw the final, brilliant, and terrifying piece of her strategy. The new leadership of Petrova Logistics had announced they were bringing in a new, external consultant to oversee the acquisition and restructuring of the Thorne Empire. A world-renowned specialist in corporate transitions and discreet asset management. A figure known in the industry only as the Alchemist. Leo felt a chill run down his spine. Anya had not just escaped her prison. She had hired her former jailer. She had taken the one person who knew all of her secrets and all of his, and had put her on a leash, binding her with a contract far more lucrative than the Thorne estate could ever have offered. He was free, but he was also a loose end. A man who knew the truth about 2 of the most powerful and ruthless women in the world. And the Alchemist did not like loose ends. His life was still in danger, perhaps more now than ever before. He was no longer a pawn. He was a liability. Leo's new reality was a high-stakes chess game played on a global board, and he was a piece constantly in motion. He adopted his new identity, Liam, a quiet, unassuming art historian living off a mysterious inheritance. He cut his hair, subtly changed his style, and began the slow, difficult process of reclaiming the masculine body he had almost lost. The hormonal treatments had left lasting changes, a softer texture to his skin, a higher natural register to his voice, but he was undeniably a man again. A man who carried the ghost of Leah within him. He moved from city to city, always under the radar, always watching. He saw the news reports, Petrova Logistics, under its new, aggressive leadership and the strategic genius of The Alchemist, had successfully completed its hostile takeover of Thorne Industries. Beatrice, his half-sister, had been utterly destroyed, stripped of her inheritance and left with nothing, a victim of her own ambition and her father's final, complex maneuver. The Alchemist was triumphant. Anya Petrova, A ghost, now controlled an empire. He knew he was being hunted. The alchemist would not leave a loose end like him wandering around. But he also knew the alchemist's methods. She would not send crude hitmen. She would send psychological probes, subtle tests, designed to expose his location without revealing her hand. His only contact was the encrypted satellite phone. Anya would call him, rarely, from untraceable numbers. Her voice, when it came, was stronger, sharper, devoid of the old melancholy. She was the CEO now, a woman who had rebuilt herself into a force of nature. "They're getting closer, Leo," she would say, her voice calm. "You need to be more careful." The alchemist is thorough. He hated that she knew. He hated that his survival depended on her information. But he was a pawn, and she was, for now, the queen. His life became a lesson in paranoia. He changed his routines daily, used multiple burner phones, and scanned every face in a crowd, searching for a hint of recognition. He learned to be invisible in plain sight, a man with a woman's quiet grace, blending into the background. He also started a new artistic project. He bought a small, portable keyboard and began composing music again. Not the angry, passionate sonatas of his youth, but quiet, complex, ethereal pieces that reflected the strange, fluid nature of his new existence. He called them the Ghost Variations. The trap was set weeks later in a small art gallery in Lisbon. He was attending an exhibition under his Liam identity, drawn by a painting that reminded him of Anya's eyes. He felt a familiar chill. Someone was watching him. He saw her across the room. She was a woman, impeccably dressed, with a calm, intellectual demeanor. She was studying him, a look of quiet, analytical interest on her face. She was not the alchemist. But she was clearly one of her agents. He knew she was trying to bait him, to provoke a reaction that would confirm his identity. He calmly walked towards her, a small, polite smile on his face. He extended his hand. "Good evening," he said, his voice, now settled into a higher, softer register, perfectly modulated. "I'm Liam Thorne. I believe you're admiring the same artist I am." The woman looked at his hand, then at his face. Her eyes scanned him, searching. For a flicker of masculine aggression? For a hint of fear? She found none. She shook his hand, her grip firm, but her gaze was still searching. "A pleasure, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice smooth. "My name is Elena. I am, like you, an admirer of beauty. And secrets." She gave a small, knowing smile. "I believe there are many layers to both, wouldn't you agree?" He looked at her, at the quiet challenge in her eyes. He had been so focused on hiding, on reverting to his male self. But the alchemist had seen through his disguise before he even built it. She was not looking for Alex or Leah. She was looking for the fluid, adaptable, post-gender human she had helped create. And she had found him. He was a puzzle she had assembled, and she wanted to see how he performed. The game had just shifted again. And he was still very much a player. The encounter in the Lisbon gallery was not an attack, it was an invitation. Leo, or Liam, as he now called himself, knew that the alchemist was not just confirming his identity. She was making a move, inviting him back onto the board. 2 days later, a package arrived at his temporary apartment. It contained no note, only a single, exquisitely tailored black suit. It was a man's suit, but cut with a fluid, androgynous elegance. And a plane ticket to a private airstrip in the Black Forest of Germany. He knew it was a summons. He also knew it was a trap. But to refuse was to spend the rest of his life running. He had to play the game. The airstrip led to a new facility, even more secluded and advanced than the sanctum. This was not a fortress, it was a think tank, a laboratory of ideas. This was the alchemist's personal headquarters. She was waiting for him in a room that was a perfect, minimalist chessboard of black and white. "Leo," she said, her voice the same low, precise instrument. "Or do you prefer Liam now? The nomenclature is fluid, I suppose." "What do you want?" he asked, dispensing with the pleasantries. "I want to offer you a position," she said, a flicker of something that might have been admiration in her eyes. "You and Anya Petrova, you were a variable I did not anticipate. You did not just follow the script. You rewrote it. You took the identity I created and you weaponized it, not just against your target, but against me. It was impressive. You tried to have me imprisoned, he reminded her. A predictable move in a game that has since become far more interesting, she countered smoothly. Anya Petrova has proven to be a masterful player. She now controls a global empire. But she is still a ghost. She rules from the shadows, through proxies. An empire needs a face, a public presence, a trusted partner to navigate the world she cannot. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. She wants me back, he said, not as a question. She needs a specific kind of partner, the alchemist corrected him. Not a man who will challenge her, not a woman who will compete with her. She needs someone who understands her world, her secrets. Someone who can move between the masculine world of corporate finance and the feminine world of her own private existence. She needs a bridge. A ghost who can walk in the daylight. She gave a small, chilling smile. She needs you. Or rather, she needs the person you have become. It was a job offer. A gilded cage of a different design. He would be Anya's public face, her ambassador, her partner. He would have wealth, power, and influence beyond his wildest dreams. But he would be a performer once again, this time on a global stage. And what is my alternative? He asked. The alternative, the alchemist said, her voice devoid of threat, a simple statement of fact, is that you remain a loose end. And as you know, I am a woman who values a tidy conclusion. The choice was clear. A life of immense power, but as a performer. Or a life of constant, hunted paranoia. He thought of his quiet, simple dream of being a sculptor. That man was long dead. He had been killed in his father's will. Anya and I have one condition, he found himself saying, the words surprising him with their boldness. Oh. The alchemist raised a single, perfect eyebrow. You will find her ex-husband, Mikhail, he said, his voice cold and steady. And you will neutralize him. Permanently. Not just the threat of him. Him. I want Anya to be truly free. That is the price of my performance. The alchemist was silent for a long moment, a look of pure, professional calculation on her face. Then she gave a slow, satisfied nod. An elegant, practical, and suitably ruthless demand, she said. I accept your terms. Welcome to the board, Mr. Thorne. Leo's new life was a paradox of immense power and profound performance. He was no longer Leah, the art consultant, but he was not quite Leo, the sculptor, either. He became a new, public persona, Liam Thorne, the enigmatic and brilliant co-chairman of the newly formed Petrova Thorne Global. He was the face of the empire. He traveled the world, negotiated deals, and spoke at conferences. He was a master of his new role. The alchemist had trained him well, and his experience as Leah had given him a unique, fluid charisma. He could command a boardroom of aggressive men with a quiet, unshakable confidence, and he could charm a suspicious female executive with a disarming, empathetic grace. He was the perfect synthesis, the bridge the alchemist had described. His wardrobe, curated by the alchemist, was his uniform. He wore the exquisitely tailored, androgynous suits, a style that became his public signature. He was a figure of fluid, modern power, a man who was comfortable with his own inherent femininity, a walking, talking embodiment of the company's forward-thinking brand. It was all a brilliant, calculated lie. He and Anya were a formidable team. They spoke daily, a queen and her public king, ruling their empire from opposite ends of the world. She would feed him strategy and information from the shadows of her new, even more secure sanctum, and he would execute it flawlessly in the daylight. They were untouchable. True to her word, the alchemist had neutralized Mikhail. A series of unfortunate financial scandals and the quiet, surgical dismantling of his assets had left him a ruined, powerless man, no longer a threat to anyone. Anya was, for the first time in over a decade, truly free. But freedom was a relative term. Leo's life was a constant performance. He was always on stage. The only time he could be himself was in the quiet of his hotel rooms, late at night, when he would work on his music, the ghost variations, the only true thing left in his life. He met with Beatrice once. He had arranged a generous, anonymous settlement for her, a quiet act of penance. She was a different woman, the hard, ambitious shell stripped away, leaving a bruised but more human person. "You won, Leo," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and bitterness. "You played his game and you won." "No one won," he had replied. The most surreal part of his new life was his occasional, mandatory consultations with the alchemist. They were no longer master and asset. They were collaborators, two architects of a global deception. "You are my greatest creation, Liam," she told him during one meeting, her tone a cold, clinical statement of fact. "You have surpassed the original design." "I'm not a creation," he said, the words feeling hollow even to him. "I'm a person." A rare, fleeting, almost sad smile touched her lips. "Are you?" she asked. "Or are you just the most elegant, most convincing, and most powerful ghost I have ever had the pleasure of writing?" The question haunted him. He had wealth. He had power. He had given Anya her freedom. He had, by every metric of his father's cruel will, succeeded beyond imagination. But as he looked at his reflection in the mirror of his penthouse apartment, at the elegant stranger in the beautiful suit, the man with the quiet, graceful hands and the sad, knowing eyes, he felt a profound, unshakable sense of loss. He had played the game. He had won the world. And in the process, he had lost the one thing he had been fighting for all along, himself. He was a king, but his kingdom was a cage. 3 years into his reign as the public king of Petrovathorn Global, Leo received an unexpected message on his encrypted phone. It was from Anya. But it wasn't a business directive. It was a single, high-resolution audio file. He put on a pair of headphones and pressed play. The sound that filled his ears was a cello, a magnificent, soul-stirring sound. It was a professional, concert hall quality recording. And the piece it was playing was one of his ghost variations. He listened, stunned, as the anonymous, secret music he had composed in lonely hotel rooms was brought to life with a passion and a depth that he had only ever imagined. When the piece ended, a new message appeared on the screen. "I believe the composer of this piece is a genius. I have arranged for its anonymous debut with the Berlin Philharmonic next month. The world deserves to hear this music. And the composer deserves to be free to write more of it." It was followed by a second message. "The alchemist's contract is concluded. She has been paid, and she has been retired. All files pertaining to Leah and Leo Thorne have been permanently erased. The ghost has been exorcised." A final message appeared. "You have a choice, Leo. You can remain a king, or you can become a sculptor again. The world will not remember you, but I will. Thank you for my freedom. Now it is time for you to have yours." He sat there, in his silent, beautiful penthouse, the sound of his own, resurrected music still echoing in his ears. It was a release. A pardon. An escape hatch from the gilded cage he had built for himself. He could stay. He could remain Liam Thorne, the powerful, enigmatic co-chairman. He had earned that life. But it was a performance, and his soul was weary of the stage. The next morning, Liam Thorne, the public face of an empire, vanished without a trace, just as mysteriously as Anya Petrova had a decade before. The financial world was thrown into a frenzy of speculation, but the alchemist was no longer there to spin the narrative, and the ghost left no trail. 6 months later, in a small, sun-drenched studio in a quiet, forgotten corner of coastal Italy, a sculptor was at work. He was a man in his late 20s, with kind, quiet eyes and hands that were slowly, painstakingly, relearning the feel of clay and stone. His hair was growing out. He wore simple, paint-splattered clothes. He was no one of consequence. His name was Leo. He received a package one afternoon. Inside was the program from the Berlin Philharmonic's recent concert. The highlight of the evening had been the debut of a stunning new piece, The Ghost Variations, by a brilliant, anonymous new composer, a piece the critics were hailing as a masterpiece of modern music. He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. He had not lost himself, after all. He had just sent his ghost out into the world to live for him. He put the program down and turned back to the block of marble he was working on. He picked up his chisel. The shape was still rough, unformed, but he could see the figure hidden within it. It was not a man. It was not a woman. It was just a form, a figure of quiet, fluid, and hard-won grace. It was a self-portrait. And for the first time in a very long time, he was free to create.